It started with something so small, I almost didn't notice it. We moved to the countryside for the peace. That's what my wife said, anyway. I thought it was just her way of escaping the chaos of the city and maybe our crumbling marriage. The house we bought was modest, 2 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, and a generous yard that sloped into thick forest. The trees stood a good 50 feet away from the back fence, and beyond them was nothing but wilderness. No neighbors. No noise. Just birdsong, the occasional fox, and the whisper of wind rustling through pine. But on the 3rd morning after we moved in, I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee and froze. The forest looked closer. At first, I chalked it up to tired eyes or bad perspective. Maybe the angle of the sun was playing tricks on me. But it wasn't just a feeling. I could swear that the nearest trees were now just beyond the fence, maybe 20 feet closer than yesterday. I mentioned it to Emily, but she barely looked up from her phone. "You're imagining things," she muttered. Maybe the landscapers cleared more ground than we thought. Landscapers? We didn't hire any. Still, I let it go. That night, I stood at the kitchen window. The moonlight illuminated the backyard, casting shadows that danced across the grass. I squinted, heart beating faster. The trees were even closer. I could see details in the bark now, jagged slashes like claw marks. One tree had what looked like a rope swing, though it hung limp and torn. We didn't have a swing. I stepped outside with a flashlight. The beam barely pierced the darkness, but enough to make me stop in my tracks. There were footprints in the dewy grass. Not animal. Not human either. Long, 3-toed impressions with deep, narrow claw marks. They led from the tree line to the back porch, and stopped directly beneath the window where I stood every night. I backed away and locked the door. Emily laughed when I told her. "You're scaring yourself. It's just a forest. You grew up in the suburbs, remember?" She was right. I was being paranoid. Still, I couldn't sleep. Not that night. Not the next. Every morning, the forest crept closer. By the end of the week, the trees were brushing against our fence. And they weren't just trees anymore. They breathed. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, just stress or sleeplessness. But deep down, I knew the truth. The forest was alive. It wasn't just growing closer in some natural, explainable way. No, it was moving with purpose, with hunger. On the 6th night, I sat on the porch in the dark, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a baseball bat. The wind was dead still, but the trees swayed gently, almost rhythmically. Watching them for too long gave me a headache, like they were shifting when I blinked. The shadows between them seemed to crawl. Then I heard it, a low whisper, like someone speaking right behind my ear, but when I turned, nothing was there. The words weren't clear at first, just sibilant syllables like wind brushing against skin. But they grew louder, closer, until I heard it. "Come home." I stumbled backward, heart racing. The flashlight flickered, then died completely. The backyard was cloaked in absolute darkness. Even the moonlight seemed to retreat. The shadows twisted unnaturally long. And then I saw movement. A branch bent forward, far too low to be natural. It reached across the fence like a crooked finger. I ran inside, bolting the door behind me. Emily was still awake, scrolling on her tablet in bed, completely unfazed. "You need help," she said, not even looking at me. "Maybe talk to someone." "No, Em. I swear it. The forest, it's trying to come in." It whispered to me. She rolled her eyes. "You've been drinking too much coffee and obsessing over this stupid yard." The argument lasted only a minute. She shut off her light and turned her back to me. I couldn't sleep again. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard the baby crying. Except we don't have a baby. It was faint at first, coming from outside. A thin, fragile wail drifting through the air like a foghorn on a quiet lake. I crept to the window. The forest now loomed inside the fence. Branches curled over the grass like claws gripping the earth. One tree had moved closer than the rest, an ancient, gnarled pine with a hollow trunk. The crying came from inside it. Soft, pitiful, human. I slammed the curtains shut and backed away. Emily sat up in bed, eyes wide. "You heard it too?" I whispered. But she just stared at me, face pale. Her voice came out in a breathless rasp. It said my name. Emily hadn't spoken since that night. After she whispered, "It said my name," she curled beneath the blankets like a child and refused to talk about it again. She'd always been the skeptic, grounded, rational, dismissive of anything supernatural. But something in her eyes now, it wasn't fear exactly. It was resignation. Like a part of her already knew what was happening, and had chosen to ignore it. I didn't have that luxury. By the seventh day, the trees weren't just at the fence. They were the fence. Our wooden boundary had vanished entirely, swallowed by twisted roots and coiled vines that pulsed like veins. I called a tree removal service. They didn't show up. I tried the police. They laughed it off and told me to stop wasting their time. I stood on the porch again that evening, staring into the dense wall of branches. The forest looked thicker than before. Trees that hadn't existed yesterday now towered overhead like ancient sentinels, blocking the sky. Then I noticed something new. Footprints. Not in the grass this time, but in the dirt beneath the porch. And they were mine. Identical boots. Identical stride. Except they led out into the woods and didn't come back. I never walked that way. Panicking, I returned inside and grabbed my phone, desperate to capture something. Anything, to prove what was happening. But every photo I took of the trees came out wrong. Blurred. Distorted. Like the forest didn't want to be seen. That night, Emily didn't come to bed. I found her in the hallway, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest. "They're inside," she whispered. "What do you mean?" She lifted a trembling hand and pointed to the corner where the walls met the floor. The wood was cracking. Hairline fractures ran along the baseboards. And from them grew roots. Thin, pale tendrils pushed up through the gaps in the floorboards, writhing like worms. They coiled toward Emily's legs. I yanked her up and pulled her into the kitchen, slamming the door behind us. I grabbed duct tape and frantically sealed the edges of the door. Then I pushed the heavy oak table against it. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps above us, slow, dragging steps pacing in the attic. We don't use the attic. We never even opened the hatch since we moved in. Emily's lips trembled. "It's already here." I didn't want to believe it. Until we heard the voice again. Right above us. It whispered, "You don't belong here. The forest remembers what you took." I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Emily. We sat at the kitchen table, listening to the slow creaking of footsteps above us and the subtle groaning of wood as something, not someone, shifted its weight in the attic. By dawn, the noises stopped. The silence was somehow worse. When I finally summoned the courage to climb into the attic, I found dust. Cobwebs. Boxes we'd never opened. Nothing else. But there, right in the center, were muddy footprints. The same three-toed prints from outside. They circled the hatch, stopping exactly where I stood. I didn't tell Emily. That afternoon, I did what I should have done days ago. I went to the town archives. The local librarian was an old woman with trembling hands and sharp eyes. When I told her my address, her demeanor changed instantly. She grew stiff, eyes narrowing behind her smudged glasses. "You bought the Holloway place," she muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" She slid an old newspaper clipping across the counter. The headline read, "Family vanishes in Midnight Forest, home left abandoned." The article was dated 30 years ago. The Holloways, parents and 2 children, had lived in our house. One night, they disappeared without a trace. No signs of struggle. No bodies. Just an empty house and footprints leading into the woods. "They said the forest swallowed them," the librarian whispered. "No one would buy the land. Locals said it was cursed. That the trees had grown out of old soil, blood-soaked and bitter." "Why?" I asked, my mouth dry. "Why would the forest take them?" She leaned in. "Because the land was never meant to be tamed." On the drive back, my thoughts spiraled. What if the forest wasn't expanding? What if our house was sinking back into it, being reclaimed by something ancient? Back home, Emily was sitting by the window, staring out. "They're waiting," she said softly. "They want us to give something back." "What are you talking about?" She didn't answer. Just kept staring. That's when I noticed her hands, red marks wrapped around her wrists, like vines had gripped her in her sleep. That night I heard a knocking. Not on the front door. From beneath the floorboards. 3 slow knocks. I pressed my ear to the hardwood, heart hammering. A voice drifted up, muffled, raspy, and cruel. "One of you must stay." I staggered back. Emily was standing behind me now, her eyes blank. "It's me, isn't it?" she asked, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "It's always the one who doesn't believe." I didn't want to believe what the forest said. "One of you must stay." It repeated that message in whispers through the floor, in the cries of the trees, in the endless footsteps in the attic. The house groaned like it was tired of resisting. Like it was alive now too, another extension of the forest's will. I begged Emily to leave with me. We packed a bag. We tried to get in the car. But the moment we opened the door, the forest was there, no longer outside the yard, not even at the doorstep, but in the living room. Branches snaked down the walls. Leaves fluttered from the ceiling. Vines coiled around the staircase like veins beneath skin. Our home had become a part of it. "No one ever leaves," Emily whispered. "They just return." I turned to run, dragging her with me, but she stopped. I felt her hand slip from mine. "I think it chose me," she said quietly. "And if I go, it'll take both of us." I shook my head, terrified. "No, we're not doing this. We fight it." But she only smiled, bittersweet calm. "You remember the dreams I told you about?" she asked. "The ones I've had since we moved in? I didn't want to scare you, but I've seen them." "Seen who?" She pointed toward the trees pressing against the windows now. "The Holloways. The family who lived here before. They're in the forest. They became it." The branches tapped against the glass, gently, like knuckles on a coffin lid. "I see them when I sleep," Emily continued. "And last night, they asked me to come home." No, this is crazy," I choked, backing away. "You're not giving yourself up. We leave. Now." But even as I spoke, the vines slithered toward her, slowly curling around her ankles. She didn't flinch. "I think it was always me. I didn't believe, and now I do. That's all it wanted." She looked at me, tearful but firm. "Go," she said, "before it changes its mind." I screamed her name as the forest took her, swift, silent. One moment she stood before me. The next, she was gone. The floorboards closed as if nothing had happened. The branches retreated. The house exhaled a long, hollow breath. And the forest? It stepped back. When I stumbled out into the driveway, dawn had begun to bleed across the sky. The trees, now back beyond the fence, stood still as statues. Emily was gone, but the forest had receded. That was the deal. That was the price. Now I live alone. I keep every light on. I sleep with the TV blaring and a shotgun by my bed. Not that it would help. And every night, I look out the window at the forest. It never grows closer anymore. But it doesn't move away either. It's waiting.